The film begins with a harrowing scene. A woman named Violet lies bloodied and injured on the ground. As she struggles to crawl away, her husband Blake arrives and viciously kicks her. He then points a gun at her but, in a shocking twist, hands the weapon to her and urges her to shoot him. Years later, Violet has turned her life around. Now a therapist, she dedicates herself to helping women who have survived domestic abuse. One morning, she receives a text from a man named Henry, asking her out on a date. Around the same time, a man claiming to be from the electric company shows up to read the meter. Violet, thinking nothing of it, lets him inside. That evening, she's at home playing with her young son, Toby, when her sister Jen arrives to babysit. As Violet gets ready for her date, she reminds Jen that Toby needs to be in bed by 8 p.m. sharp and adds that she'll be monitoring them through the home CCTV system. Violet heads to an upscale restaurant situated on a high floor of a skyscraper. While riding the elevator, she receives a message from Henry saying he'll be 10 minutes late and suggests she wait at the bar. She makes her way there and is greeted by a kind bartender named Kara. Violet, feeling nervous, confides that it's her first date with this man. Suddenly, an elderly man named Richard approaches her, mistaking her for his blind date, Diane. Violet politely corrects him, and Richard apologizes, explaining he's meeting someone for the first time. They share a toast to their upcoming dates but are quickly interrupted by a man named Phil, who tries to flirt with Violet. Kara steps in and drives him away, explaining that Phil is the new piano player and flirts with everyone. Soon after, Richard's actual date arrives, and the pair go off to their table. Violet texts her sister when a random meme appears on her phone via an app called Digidrop, similar to AirDrop. Curious, she scans the room and notices several people on their phones, trying to guess who sent it. Just then, Henry arrives and compliments Violet on how beautiful she looks. The two are seated at their reserved table, which offers a stunning view of the city. Henry, who's a photographer, apologizes for bringing his camera bag, explaining he couldn't leave it in the car. He takes out a small hockey puck and tells her it's a gift for Toby, which touches Violet deeply. As their drinks are being ordered by a waiter named Matt, Violet receives another Digidrop meme, this time with a message urging her not to ignore it. She shows it to Henry, and they glance around the room, suspecting a group of prom kids nearby might be behind the prank. Suddenly, a more disturbing message comes through, instructing her to check her home security cameras. She pulls up the feed and sees Toby and Jen in the bedroom. But her heart drops when she notices a masked man standing in the living room, staring directly at the camera with a gun in hand. Henry senses something's wrong and asks her about it, but before she can respond, another message warns her to stay silent. Violet excuses herself and heads to the restroom, trying to call 911, but another message flashes on her screen. Her phone has been cloned, and every move she makes is being watched. If she leaves the restaurant or alerts anyone, her son will be killed. When Violet reaches the washroom, she approaches a group of girls and politely asks for help. However, she's immediately interrupted by another chilling message warning her not to seek assistance from anyone. Left with no choice, Violet borrows an eyeliner from one of the girls and attempts to scrawl the word help across her palm. Unfortunately, the girls misinterpret her gesture, fail to grasp the urgency, and casually leave the bathroom. Frustrated and desperate, Violet scans the room carefully and soon discovers a hidden tapping device beneath the sink, leaving her completely stunned. She quickly heads back to her table, where Henry immediately notices that she appears visibly shaken. Violet tries to downplay her distress by explaining that she's just anxious, this being the first time she and Toby have been separated, especially since his father passed away. In the middle of her sentence, her eyes catch sight of another tapping device, this time cleverly concealed within the lamp on their table. A cold shiver runs down her spine as the realization dawns that the dropper is eavesdropping on their every word. Trying to think on her feet, Violet tells Henry she has a fear of heights and suggests that they move to another table. Henry agrees without hesitation and calls over Matt, the waiter, to request the change. Not long after, Matt returns and informs them that another table is now available. But just as they prepare to move, Violet receives yet another threatening message from the dropper: if she switches tables, Toby will be dead within a minute. Paralyzed with fear, Violet quickly changes her mind and suggests they stay at the current table, making up a reason that they had chosen this spot for the view. Both Henry and Matt appear puzzled, but they respect her wishes and agree. Moments later, Matt comes back to take their order. In a low voice, Violet quietly asks the dropper what they want from her. The response is swift and unnerving. She must retrieve the SD card from Henry's camera. How she accomplishes that is entirely up to her. With her heart pounding, Violet discreetly removes her watch and slips it into her purse while Henry is distracted. Once Matt walks away, she pretends to realize her watch is missing and insists she had it on when they sat down. She asks Henry to check with the hostess to see if it was found. Eager to help, Henry leaves the table. Seizing the opportunity, Violet reaches into Henry's camera bag and pulls out his camera. Her pulse races as she flips through the photos, uncovering incriminating images of the city mayor mingling with shady individuals, along with damning financial documents exposing fraud and corruption. Without hesitation, she removes the SD card and slips it into her possession just as Henry returns. Henry says the hostess hadn't seen her watch, just as another message from the dropper flashes on her screen, instructing her to head back to the bathroom. Violet tells Henry she may have left it there after all and excuses herself. Once inside the bathroom again, a new directive arrives: she must destroy the SD card and flush it. Torn but terrified for her son's safety, Violet complies. She smashes the SD card and watches it swirl away down the toilet. She desperately begs the dropper to remove the man from her home, but the voice coldly replies that her task isn't finished yet. It then instructs her to inspect the towel dispenser. Reluctantly, Violet opens it and discovers a vial filled with liquid. To her horror, the dropper orders her to slip it into Henry's drink and kill him, assuring her that the poison will be quick and painless. Violet refuses, insisting she can't go through with murdering someone. But the dropper, unmoved, reminds her that she's done it before, implying she's more capable than she admits. Shaken to the core, Violet leaves the restroom, her mind spinning with questions about the dropper's identity. Back at the table, Henry is already getting ready to leave, assuming Violet isn't interested in him. He offers to reschedule, pays the bill, and begins to walk away. But in a moment of desperation, Violet grabs him and kisses him passionately, urging him to stay. Caught off guard but thrilled, Henry agrees. Just then, they spot Diane yelling at Richard and calling him a jerk before storming out of the restaurant. Violet and Henry sit back down, and the dropper immediately prompts her to finish what she started. At that moment, Matt arrives to take their order, while Phil starts playing the piano. Thinking quickly, Violet tells Matt she wants to tip the pianist. She takes out her lipstick and writes hostages along with her address on a $20 bill, then discreetly hands it to Matt to deliver to Phil. A few moments later, Matt gives the money to Phil. As Violet continues the conversation by asking Henry about his job, we learn he's been the mayor's press photographer for 5 years. She tries to dig deeper, questioning whether the mayor is a decent person, but Henry sidesteps the question with a vague answer. Meanwhile, Phil notices the writing on the bill and freezes, his expression turning pale with fear. Violet sees him attempt to make a phone call, but the panic-stricken pianist quickly abandons the idea and returns to playing, sipping his drink nervously. Soon after, Matt brings their food. As Violet begins eating her salad, something startling happens. She receives a text from the dropper accusing her of messing up. Violet frantically apologizes, but the damage is already done. Moments later, Phil suddenly collapses, having unknowingly consumed a poisoned drink. Horrified, Violet checks her home surveillance feed. On the screen, she sees a masked man knocking Jen unconscious and locking Toby inside a room. The dropper instructs Violet to finish the job. Meanwhile, Phil gets up and begins heading toward the elevator alone. But the dropper coldly warns her that Phil won't make it out of the lobby alive. Anxiety wells up inside her, yet she forces a calm smile and acts as if nothing is wrong. Trying to maintain the charade, she suggests to Henry that they should lighten the mood with some tequila and hurries to the bar. But in her rush, she drops her purse, something Henry notices, especially the glimpse of her watch. At the bar, Violet orders 2 shots of tequila and attempts to discreetly lace one with poison. But the dropper texts her again, instructing her to do it back at the table. Returning to her seat, Henry hands her the watch, explaining it must have slipped from her purse. He's clearly bothered by her behavior, her constant glancing around and visible discomfort. Concerned, he urges her to be honest, saying he's willing to help if something's wrong. In that moment, Violet is struck by a memory, a night she tried to kill Blake but couldn't go through with it. She remembers little Toby crying as he witnessed the scene, and how Blake, without hesitation, turned the gun toward the boy. Shaken, Violet opens up to Henry, revealing that she feels like a terrible mother for staying with an abusive man even after Toby was born. Her son had seen things no child should ever witness. Henry, moved, admits that he too once placed his trust in the wrong person, someone who ended up causing great harm. He confesses that despite his efforts, he couldn't stop the damage. But then gently reassures her, saying her ex didn't steal her hope, because she's still standing, just like he is. Violet smiles through her pain and tells Henry he's a good man. She then excuses herself, saying she forgot the limes, and asks him to get them. As Henry heads to the bar, Violet seizes the moment and, with a heavy heart, spikes his drink. Henry soon returns with the limes and lifts the glass to drink, but Violet can't go through with it. She accidentally spills wine on him, forcing him to set the glass down. As he leaves to clean up, Violet receives a chilling text, "That wasn't very smart." Moments later, Kara walks up to Violet, noticing her anxious demeanor. She asks if Henry did something wrong and offers to help. But Violet confesses that the issue isn't with Henry, it's something else entirely. That's when Kara drops a bombshell. She's noticed that Richard has been staring at Violet all evening, even though he's supposedly on a date with another woman. Furious, Violet storms over to Richard, carrying 2 shots of tequila, one of them laced. She claims she feels bad that his date left and offers him a drink. but the man unexpectedly calls her by name and refuses the shot. Startled, Violet points out that she never told him her name. Realizing the truth is out, Richard calmly invites her to sit. He then confesses he is the dropper. Richard goes on to reveal that he works for the mayor and that his mission was to eliminate Henry, who is, in fact, an undercover FBI informant. He explains that the Digidrop messages are untraceable, making it the perfect tool for his assignments, and for manipulating her into carrying them out. When Violet questions why they chose her, Richard coldly explains that framing her was easier because of her past. She had already been accused of murder. Violet insists she didn't kill her late husband, but the old man remains unconvinced. A quick flashback reveals the truth. Blake had nearly shot Toby, but when he heard approaching police sirens, he chose to end his own life. Richard accuses Violet of stirring up unnecessary trouble, blaming her for Phil's death. He smugly reveals that there's video evidence of her drugging Henry's drink, leaving her with no way to escape the trap. According to him, the only way she can protect her son now is by killing Henry herself. Just then, Henry arrives. Violet introduces him to Richard as an old friend and offers him a shot of tequila, claiming it's spiked. Henry drinks it and heads back to their table, unaware of the deeper game being played. Violet then demands Richard to order his man to leave her house, saying the job is finished. Richard complies, instructing the masked man to leave immediately. Confident in his victory, Richard begins enjoying his dessert, casually chatting with Violet, until she suddenly reveals the truth. It was his dessert that was poisoned, not Henry's drink. Enraged, the old man pulls out a gun and fires at Violet, but Henry unexpectedly leaps in front of her and takes the bullet. Chaos breaks out in the restaurant as frightened patrons flee. Richard chases Violet and nearly shoots her, but Kara intervenes, causing him to hit a glass wall instead. In a frenzy, he stabs a bartender before turning back to pursue Violet. As Richard aims at her once again, Violet notices the cracked glass wall behind him. At the same time, he orders the masked man to return to the house and kill Toby. Then, in a sudden twist, the old man crashes through the weakened glass and falls to his death. Violet, hanging onto a tablecloth snagged on something, is barely saved when a wounded Henry pulls her back inside the restaurant. Immediately afterward, Violet checks the security feed and sees the masked man approaching her son's room. Grabbing Henry's car keys, she urges him to call the police and bolts from the restaurant. She speeds through traffic on her way home. While back at the house, Jen regains consciousness and searches for Toby. The masked man finds the boy and tries to harm him, but Jen manages to stab him in the leg and drags Toby away. They lock themselves in a room and barricade the door with furniture. Unfortunately, the intruder breaks in and shoots Jen in the arm. He fires multiple shots into the bed to finish off Toby, just as Violet returns home. Hearing her arrival, the masked man quickly moves downstairs. Meanwhile, Violet, sensing danger, grabs a kitchen knife and braces herself. Moments later, the intruder enters the living room. Violet strikes first, stabbing him, but he easily overpowers her and hurls her across the room. As he pulls off his mask, Violet is horrified to recognize him as the same man from the electric company earlier that morning. Just as he's about to kill her, a remote-controlled toy car arrives, sent by Toby, armed with a gun. Violet seizes the opportunity, takes the gun, and fatally shoots the intruder, bringing an end to the terrifying ordeal. Mother and son embrace in a tearful, relieved hug. The scene then transitions to a later time, showing Henry recovering in the hospital. A news report reveals a major scandal involving the mayor's office and the violent restaurant incident. Violet later visits Henry at the hospital, where he gratefully thanks her for saving his life. Jen, also recovering in the same facility, playfully teases them before taking her leave. The film concludes with Henry and Violet happily making plans for a second date. That's it for today's story. Like, subscribe, and comment your next movie pick. See you in the next one, only on ScenePhoria.